An advisor to the Ukrainian president confirmed on Monday that Ukraine had not been invited to those talks in Saudi Arabia, but regardless said at the moment there is nothing on the negotiating table worth discussing for Ukraine when it comes to ending the war with Russia. The Ukrainian president has become particularly concerned that these peace talks are moving ahead without Ukraine's or Europe's involvement, with those talks in Saudi Arabia only being a bilateral discussion between Moscow and Washington. Volodymyr Zelenskyy says that Ukraine will never accept any discussion between the US and Russia without Ukraine's participation. Further, he says that effectively Ukraine would regard any outcome of those talks as having no result if they had not included Ukraine's participation. The phrase we're hearing from Kyiv over and over again is nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Kyiv has made some suggestions about how it sees the outcome of this war going. He has, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, for example, said that if NATO will not accept Ukraine in the short term, then there must be additional troops sent to Ukraine to help it defend itself. For example, he suggested that Ukraine needs a total of 1.5 million troops to equal the Russian advance. He says that that would mean hundreds of thousands of additional troops would have to come to the country to support Ukrainian troops. Now, the United States has ruled out sending its own forces, which means Europe would have to send hundreds of thousands itself, something that is being talked about in Paris on Monday, with European leaders trying to figure out who may or may not be willing, theoretically, to send troops to Ukraine as part of any ceasefire deal. Another suggestion that's come from the Ukrainian president is Ukraine's troops hold some of Russia's Kursk region. That region, he suggests, could be given back to Russia in return for another region of occupied Ukraine, though that is something that the Kremlin has ruled out. And he's also said, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in effect, weakened this red line about returning to pre-2014 borders. He has suggested that even if Ukraine cannot, as part of any peace deal, retake Crimea, return Crimea to Ukraine, that there must be a return to the pre-2022 borders, where the 4 occupied regions of Ukraine that Russia currently holds, though none of them completely, should be returned to Ukraine as part of any deal. These demands, though, may mean nothing if the US and Russia continue to talk just amongst themselves about how this war in Ukraine should end. As to what Volodymyr Zelensky's getting up to later in the week, he is in the Middle East now, and he will be going to Saudi Arabia on Wednesday, but that's for a long planned state visit, though there may be some movement with regard to Ukraine's participation in these talks, with General Keith Kellogg, the US President's Ukraine envoy, coming to Kyiv, and Volodymyr Zelenskyy hopes he will also visit the front lines and speak with Ukrainian troops. That's the first time that such a high-ranking figure has come to Ukraine from the new US government, and it's Volodymyr Zelensky's chance to try to convince him that Kyiv's current desired path to peace is also what the United States approaches with Russia. Stuart Smith, SABC News, Kyiv.